And then, like, of course, I guess it had been like in my head at some point. I might have like unconsciously thought, but like, of course, Plato's fucking cave is a mechanism to understand capitalism. Like, of course,
it makes a lot of sense.
So
yeah,
obvious.
I've never heard that before, but
so good.
it's because I think Plato is written off very much so as this kind of like reactionary thinker.
You think so? I guess in
I think
Republic,
in terms of like the the philosopher ruler and all that.
right.
What's
right.
fun about the Republic, though, is that it's a thought experiment, right? It's about trying to make a utopia, and so, like, I always feel like those things are not necessarily, like, he's not necessarily being totalitarian. He's just it's about understanding them, like, what you would need to do in order to create a society that is toward the good, and I guess for him.
And if you want to be, if you want to be fair to the Republic, he tests it against the theory of authoritarianism and
That's true.
Lands on the philosopher king, the king who doesn't want to rule, as the ideal leader. But anyway,
which is the
hey,
in my eyes,
guys, should we be Are we recording this?
we are recording this.
Okay.
Are we?
I think
It's on Skype,
I think it
yeah.
matches up to maybe what Hegel says in terms of the ideal ruler, the figurehead, being either hereditary or I believe some sort of raffle, the kind of like random figurehead at the head of a state.
A raffle.
I think I heard that somewhere. Yeah, like that. Like the ideal ruler is not necessarily someone who knows how to rule but doesn't want to, but almost like a random person.
It's funny because a hereditary leader is, contrary to what it seems like at first, arbitrary. Because the only principle putting that person in charge is the fact that they were born into this family. In no other way are they qualified. It's not preferable per se. But
I was thinking of the philosopher king as the castrated leader, the one who, but who is it? I can't not. This is the problem of the dynamic. I'm like, is it the leader who knows that he is castrated, so he doesn't want to lead, or is it that he does not know? Fuck, it's really.
I'm not sure how clear the line is between like Plato in general and Marx, but rather more specifically the cave and Marx. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we didn't even talk about this, but I feel like it's a very fertile territory for theorizing Žižek's theory of ideology.
Well, I mean, it's almost implicit, right? Like,
yeah.
and
it's one of those things like I haven't really heard Žižek talk about the cave, but it seems at the same time so implicit in what he's talking about.
Right. Like,
I do know that he prefers Plato over Aristotle. That's what I do know. Can confirm that.
Well, the critique of ideology is about like this process of, at least the traditional critique of ideology is the process of like coming to know that what you are seeing is shadows. But through Marx's critique and through this short circuit reading of Frank Ruda, it's like, it's beyond that. And I think that's also where, like, sublime objective ideology, Žižek's saying it's like, the critique of ideology, the beginning of the process is to understand that what you're seeing is shadows. But there has to be something beyond that. Yeah. Emancipation is problematized, but not, it's not the end point, right? The critique of ideology actually has to land on being able to take up the shadows in a different way, understand.
Yeah, because at a certain point, like the people in the cave dwellers know that they're in a cave, and what they're looking at are illusions, very much in the way that Žižek talks about in an ideology or in an ideological sway. One can know what they're doing and nonetheless still do it.
Right. Well, they don't want to.
I think
the prisoners, the unchained prisoners, don't want to leave. They actually have to be drawn out. And I think that's like, this is to me the cynical approach where it's like, the three of us can I think on some level say how ideology works, or the ideology of capitalism, and how we participate in it.
Maybe,
but right. But we don't necessarily want to leave. What would it even be like to leave?
Here's
and then have to come back.
actually slightly tangentially. Here's Žižek speaking to Plato. He says, this is in his new book, Sex and the Failed Absolute. He says, "Therein resides Plato's deep insight. ideas are not the hidden reality beneath appearances. Plato is well aware that this hidden reality is that of ever-changing corruptive and corruptive material. Ideas are nothing but the very form of appearance. This form as such, or as Lacan succinctly rendered Plato's point, the supersensible is appearance as appearance.
And then in the context of Marx's analysis of capital, like the experience of the commodity world, the world produced by capital, also creates the very perception of that world.
Exactly. This is the logic of appearance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a second order of appearance. It's not merely the appearance of things, but the mystification of that very appearance through commodity fetishism and the ideology of capitalism.
And this is always the thing that's looming for me when a very self-assured internet Marxist talks about material conditions and material analysis, and it's like, okay, but aren't there other aspects to this organization of people and of the social and political economy? Like, it's not simply that things are sort of mutely existing to be taken advantage of or to be oppressed by our corporate overlords. There's a
Definitely,
whole system of appearing and of ideology and this whole overlay.
And it's its own undermining viewpoint in regards to the worker, for example. I think this is what we were talking about in the interview to a great extent, where like the problem of the revolutionary subject is so crucial because it involves like itself kind of a mystification, because and this is even what Marx says, they know not what they do. That's Marx's formulation of ideology. And
right.
Like the worker is supposed to be this revolutionary subject, and like you say, many internet Marxists are totally assured of it. But where is this subject, right? Like, this is the crucial problem, and I think the crucial kind of crux of so much of the ridiculous online debate about like who, the kind of fetishistic view of like the worker as this kind of like moral subject that automatically will install the revolution.
Right. Well, there's class consciousness and all that, but my own experience of working is not that I'm coming to realize
I hate
some higher status or being of my. I mean, I know that's not really the point, but nonetheless, they're not just not saying anything. He left them speechless.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about how that, at least with this reading that Frank has provided us, is that the worker is constituted, even his experience of freedom, which I guess in this case, their experience of freedom is,
or his,
whatever you want to say. The idea is that freedom and unfreedom become kind of exchangeable, right? Is that the experience of emancipation is still within the coordinates of their sort of constituent of unfreedom that is produced by the worker and by the system, right? There's this like negative feedback, the feedback loop, as it were.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I think it's like the problem with a sort of a historicist reading of Marx versus what they're doing now by reactualizing him in the present is like, well, what if we move the site of emancipation from the worker? Or, on the other hand, what if we see that the site is still in the worker, but in the worker's very negativity or the inability to come to know their own freedom sort of authentically in that position?
Right. Like not from the knowing worker, but the worker who's not supposed to know, the worker who kind of like, and this is just true of subjectivity, like as such, like we're not, and this is the great lesson of psychoanalysis, that we're not totally knowing subjects. There's this fundamental like spectral and unassured quality of our very experience of the world, and of course that is mediated given the material and ideological circumstances. But like nonetheless, the subjects exist, and given that kind of impossibility of fully knowing oneself, starting from that point, you move on to try and conceive of how that works kind of structurally.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
I guess we call it the fetish of the worker, and it's not as if we have anything against working, the worker or the oppressed worker, whatever position they find themselves in. But but really just sort of, I mean, even by way of saying that, you know, the worker or the proletariat gains class consciousness and then overthrows, you know, throws off their chains or whatever. Like in what Frank is saying in the essay, and what Plato says in the cave allegory, there's a moment at which the person is taking out doesn't want to be taken out, and then there's this strange kind of return. What would you guys say about that? I mean, like we're dealing with this kind of funny orchestration or example of that with the whole COVID thing. Like we've all been on lockdown for months, and now we're kind of, Jake, as you were saying in the interview, sort of faced with the prospect of returning to work. And
I thought that was a really great way of kind of literalizing it for you know, for at least my own experience. Like that's very much that return. That
how do you formulate the return? Yeah. Well, and I think
because
also,
we've been kind of, sorry, go ahead.
No, just to tie on to that, Will, is that it's interesting that we hoist the responsibility of emancipation and essentially like what social, political, and economic revolution onto the worker. Like it's not about.
It's funny because it's like it's an impossibility, right? Like it kind of has to be, but it also like there's these barriers. I think, but that's the kind of constant refrain of Žižek and of this kind of crew is like the courage of hopelessness, for example, or like the tearing with a negative. All these sorts of things involve going through that negative category. But sorry, I cut you off, Jake. I think you were going to
No. That was I finished there. Will, did you have something you wanted to add there?
I don't remember what it was, but it just brought to mind the phrase. Is it Holderlin? Where the danger lies, so there lies the saving power. I think you could invert that.
Where the saving power lies is the danger.
Well, like I think this brings us back to what you said, William, concerning the kind of category of the worker and the fetishistic notion of it. In that, especially now, and this is something that Žižek talks a lot about like the people, right? Like this can kind of be in some way a euphemism for the worker, the kind of good, average people out there who know what they want and, if only inspired, can be riled to create political change. The problem is that when Žižek expands the notion of the opium of the people, Marx's notion of religion, to both opium and the people, and that like the very notion of the people is itself a opiate, a complication, a fetish, and
it definitely is like it's important to remember that that ideal of people recognizing themselves is also the fetish of the general political landscape, no matter what the political shade is.
Definitely, yeah. So like with populism, right and left, the kind of the error, I think, in the kind of the notion of populism as being a kind of authentic political expression is that it's supposed to have its basis in the true beliefs and true constituted like desires of the people. That is the knowing subject.
Yeah,
right?
But what Frank is saying, you know, he's talking about not only are they looking at shadows, but I guess sort of we ourselves as cave dwellers are shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's funny to kind of tie this into like an actual political stance, because I'm not quite sure what we're saying on that front. But I guess it's like, you know, the kind of basic psychoanalytic observation that you aren't necessarily who and what you think you are.
We're just asking questions right now.
Yeah,
that's all we're doing. Is there anything, any other kind of moments in the interview or ideas that we want to just briefly touch on?
I think I want to talk about the meme in relation to the worker time dynamic. So you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but maybe just explain it.
Yeah, so there's this meme that's been going around. It's a guy at work, and on the top half of the image, and on the bottom half of the image there's a guy lying in his bed, and it says, "Can't wait to get off the bad screen," and on the bottom says, "Can't wait to look at the good screen." And this perfectly exemplifies, I think, what Frank is saying, that kind of feedback loop of the worker in the realm of capital. Even our experience of free time is still mediated through the very form of our own oppression, you know?
Yeah, the immediate, we view our freedom as as the fulfillment of our animal needs, and we are kind of like through that the unanimal, but it's through capitalism that we're so reduced that we conceive of our freedom in the kind of basic fulfillment of eating, sleeping, and having sex, which is what all animals do.
What's so great about the meme is that by using the screen as the mechanism of comparison, it's like the person on the bottom half of the meme is experiencing leisure time, is relaxing from labor in the very same way that he labors, and like
exactly.
So the important comparison here is that it's like it's not just about like eschewing the formal dichotomy. It's actually about keeping the dichotomy, but understanding that what now happens is that the free time and labor are experienced in the same ways. So you have it's not just about melting leisure, away from the equation. It's about keeping the equation and understanding that leisure and labor are essentially
they're continuous.
Like free time is the label that capitalism affixes to our otherwise to our life.
And then we are compelled to be productive in our free time.
Yeah, I mean, even just in, as Frank points out, in exercising, for example, and I think a great example of that also is in using a Fitbit to catalog the amount of steps you take in a day or the distance that you've run. I mean, it's
a fancy hamster wheel.
Well, there's something also kind of messed up. Like I think of the common description is recharging. On the on the weekend I'd like to recharge, and that, for what? Only to it's like it's important for me to relax and recharge so as to continue relaxing. No, I mean the idea is that your break is I just feel like it's like your iPhone or whatever when it's close to the end. It's like I'm just recharging you so that I can use you again.
Exactly.
We're recharging both you and the phone at the same time.
Which then throws obviously problematizes whatever you do on the weekend. Be it the sort of archetypical like spiritualized, I'm going to do nothing but meditate and work out and feel good and eat good this weekend so as to work better, work more.
And then
it's like micro-dosing psychedelics when you're working at a fucking startup or
micro-dosing free time.
Like continual vanishing of the now, because it's either like your freedom. And I think the way he wrote it in the book was also kind of shattering in a moment where you always imagine your previous self. You think back in the years, different times, different eras of your life, and you're like, oh, it was simple back then. It was free. But the freedom is only in your viewing that time as free. It was never felt as such in that time.
Right.
That's retroactive freedom, which is basically barred freedom, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what he was saying was so interesting. I thought he was talking about melancholy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Melancholy to mourning. Which is like, I mean, that's an interesting way of psychoanalyzing, but then understanding this maybe in the metric of politics is like, what does the process of moving from melancholy to mourning for the subject, or in this case maybe the worker, is a way of moving out of a constitutive loss to a loss that you like. I'd have to go back and read Freud, but I know that the difference between melancholia and mourning is that mourning is a moving beyond the loss, whereas melancholy is being like sort of stuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also interesting because the movement from melancholia to depression is the capitalistic grip of the rendering of the subject as depressed, so as to like make your experience of capitalism, the kind of melancholic experience, one of commodification and one of you don't like the layout of your life, you don't like the anxiety and the detriment that this endless cycle of work gives you. Take a pill and just feel differently about it, but still enact the exact same process.
Well,
it's like updating the operating system,
Yeah. It's tricky because mourning is about libidinal reattachment, though. So, like, to me, that actually kind of sounds capitalistic, or like, because melancholy is the inability to libidinally reattach, where mourning actually allows the subject to. I don't know.
I guess I was thinking tricky. Of the kind of movement, like the difference in description of that experience of melancholy in Freud's time to the way it appears as a description in the catalog of psychology now, like the kind of technical scientific speak of depression, as it's called now. And the difference in engagement with that is very much a difference in the way that we engage with work and our own relationship to our emotions under capitalism.
Well, sure. Right. Depression is just understood as a natural byproduct of this cyclical fucking moving from free time to back to work. It's like depression is now something that, like, remember, like, depression used to be taboo. Now it's like if you don't have it, you know,
it's like a
if
kind of
you're not depressed, then you're somehow like exceptional. And we would probably want to learn every single way in which you achieve that, because depression seems to be naturalized.
You got some yoga, you're meditating on the weekend, you're eating healthy.
Right. Well, the naturalized, I mean, what we're really talking about here is the naturalizing and eternalizing of a certain form of appearance and time in capitalism. And exactly. I think all of these things are part of that, part of that.
And allude to the fact that our subjectivity is like already, like always already like complicated by all these things. So and to tie it back again, the suggestion, the populist suggestion of like that subject is a knowing subject is to be complicated.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking about melancholy. I mean, how does melancholy as an experience arise at this particular moment? I think that just thinking in times that I've, in my wolf, felt the sweet blush of melancholy. Ennui, yeah, Weltschmerz. It generally, just thinking about it in passing, generally kind of attains to a melancholy of or about things, and also, Jake, what you were saying about a certain relation of experience, or we could say labor to time. So, like, if you're melancholic for, let's say, the 1920s or something, it's about the things, the cars, the music, a city or whatever, but also a relationship to that dynamic that capital places upon you. That is always, it's always filtered through fantasy. It was if you lived in that time, I'm sure you would have a very different perspective on it, but yeah, it's just, I think that melancholy might be a name for that kind of disavowal of our current sort of liquidation of our circumstances, in the sense that Marx says, like, all that is solid melts into air, but of kind of grasping onto the seeming solidity of the past and an experience of a different fantasy of non-alienated time.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think that was well put.
I dig. I really dig. Yeah. Grasping onto the fantasy of a non-alienated time that is always already in the past. I like that one. That's good. Let's get that tattooed, boys. We'll each get one part of it, so then together that's the whole phrase. I tried to take a stab personally at Hegel's Ravel. My God, that was a difficult book.
Oh, sorry.
I was like gearing up. That was going to be the episode's focus, and about halfway through, I thought, oh God, I think this is almost too much to.
No, just over our heads, really.
Also, I don't know. It was quite some time ago, and and it was a PhD, so one is trying to find one's own way of articulating oneself and self-expressing oneself and so forth. And I think it's, I understand that sentiment, or that.
But it would have played, like, having read about 120 pages of it, it does play into your essay in reading Marx, actually. I do think that there's a connection between what you flesh out in Hegel's Ravel as this kind of non-existent remainder, and the position of the worker in the sort of Platonic cave allegory. I just didn't think we would have the time to bring it up. But
we also tried learning the entire catalog of dialectical materialism in periods of 4 days, and realized that it was a pretty slippery term not to be trifled with.
We remained over our heads.
But in some sense, I think that is what voluntary submission looks like, right? I mean, you put yourself in a situation where you don't know how the fuck you're going to survive it, and then something happens, and it's actually, I don't know, that is what in a good sense education looks like, or formation.
Right.
And
Right.
Well put, yeah, totally.
A different productive thing, yeah.
And to end on a good news, my mobile phone just told me that Bolsonaro has coronavirus.
Oh,
I saw it. Yeah, it's
all right. Well,
I thought he already had coronavirus.
I think he's had it a few times.
Cold.
Oh damn. Okay, then it's.
But that was a while ago, so maybe it's more serious. One can only hope.
When you were talking about the clownish sovereign, I was like, we're not going to name any names.
Yeah.
No.
Definitely rang some bells. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said timely. I was like, yep. There's at least 3 or 4 people I can think of that fit that description.
Yes, there are a few around these days.
Well, it was
anyhow.
It was so good to talk.
Guys, that was fun.
And so on and so on. And so on and so on.